Bereavement care is part of hospice, but what exactly is it? Who does it? And what does it look like? You're listening to Heartbeat from the Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer, here with Jerry Fenter.
Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, we're here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care. And because we know how busy life can get, Heartbeat is designed to give you helpful information in a bite-sized format. Don't miss the California Hospice and Palliative Care Association annual conference coming up June the 6th through the 10th in Orange, California. The conference theme is Back to the Basics at the Bedside and features a 2-day pre-conference on LNEC communication. Up to 16 continuing education units are available for attendees. Early registration ends April 1st, so visit calhospice.org to register and tell them you heard about it on the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Today's all about you.
No.
Oh, yes, it is.
No, it's not.
We're talking about bereavement care. That is all on the psychosocial, spiritual side of things. So I'm totally off the hook.
This is true. It is all about bereavement, and bereavement is typically on the psychosocial side. The clinical doesn't have too much to do with that.
Yay. Okay, so I'm going to sit back and be lazy today, and you're going to talk.
You're going to ask the questions, and I'll answer the questions. How's that?
Okay. What the heck is bereavement?
Bereavement care is actually a regulatory part of hospice care. CMS tells every hospice agency that they need to provide bereavement care for the families or the survivors of the patients who are on hospice. So for 13 months, the hospice agency should provide bereavement care to the survivors.
What exactly does bereavement mean?
Bereavement is the reaction or the response that people typically will have when they are grieving. So when they are grieving the loss or the death of a loved one, they're going to feel that grief. And so the bereavement care is about providing them with some help, some guidance, some resources to be able to help them through this time when they're grieving, the emotional response of the loss. So there are things that each agency will do, and each agency will create their bereavement program a little bit differently. Each agency does it the way that they feel like is best for the survivors.
Who's involved in bereavement care?
Typically, bereavement care can actually begin with the nurse when the nurse goes out to pronounce the death of a patient. The nurse may be the only one there, and she or he may provide bereavement care at the time of death.
So grief support, seeing what the family's response to the death is.
Right, actually doing what we call a bereavement risk assessment. So they will do a assessment of how are the survivors coping at this point.
Okay.
And what are the coping risks that are there present with this family? And so the nurse will do an actual assessment right there with the family. But then either a social worker or a chaplain, spiritual counselor, will come in later and do a more full, broad assessment of the bereavement needs of the family,
okay,
the caregivers. And so they'll begin to look at, how many children are in this home. And children in a home create a more significant bereavement risk. And so they're going to find out, are there any children in the home? They'll look at the social aspects of the caregiver at this point. Are they working? Are they retired? How much connection do they have with the community? How much connection do they have with the community of faith? How much support do they have from their family? What kind of relationship did they have with the person who died? So they're going to do a much broader assessment when it comes to the needs, the bereavement needs of the family that's survived.
And based on that bereavement risk assessment, that assessment that is done after the patient dies, then there's a bereavement plan of care that's created from there, isn't there?
Right. So we typically will divide the risk into levels. So if it's low risk, something that we consider to be normal grieving, an appropriate grieving response, we'll call it a low risk. However, if there are other factors that are involved with this, then we might consider it to be a moderate risk. And if it's a moderate risk, we're going to provide greater attention to this family member or to the family itself. And then there are those times when we might consider this to be a high risk. High risk could be if someone inside the family has threatened suicide, or if there is prolonged grief. And actually, prolonged grief has become more of an issue these days than it's been in a long time.
Well, and prolonged grief is now recognized in the DSM.
Right.
For psychiatric diagnoses.
Right.
So,
and in many of those high-risk cases, the hospice agency will refer the family member to a specialist, someone who specializes in grief counseling.
Okay. So, do you have to participate in bereavement?
No, the family does not have to participate in bereavement. If they choose to decline services, bereavement services, they can. Just as they can choose to decline spiritual care, social CNAs when the patient was actually on service, they can also decide not to have bereavement services as well. That's not a problem. Now, when you ask that question, there's also the flip side to that is the agency. Can the agency decide not to provide bereavement services?
Right.
And the answer to that question is no.
No, because it is required by regulation.
Absolutely.
So if you work for a hospice agency, your agency should be providing bereavement care. We're excited to share a great educational opportunity with you. The California Hospice and Palliative Care Association is holding its annual conference coming up in June of 2022. It's going to be on the beautiful campus of Chapman University in Orange, California. The conference starts with an LNEC communication curriculum on Monday and Tuesday, June 6th and 7th, followed by the annual conference and exposition Wednesday through Friday, June 8th through the 10th. The theme for this year's conference is Back to the Basics at the Bedside. You'll hear information on the basic principles of the pillars of quality hospice care taught by experts in the end-of-life industry. This is a great opportunity to get those continuing education units and to reset your focus on what's really important in patient care. Early registration is open until April 1st, so visit the CHAPCA website at calhospice.org to register and tell them you heard about it on the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Many times bereavement care can get the short end of the stick, so to speak.
This is true.
Because it's not a service that's actually paid for by CMS or by Medicare.
Well, and the regulation itself doesn't say in your bereavement program, this is what you will provide. It doesn't state explicitly and plan out in detail the interventions that you have to offer to your families during that 13 months bereavement. So what is typically involved in a bereavement plan of care? So let's say a low risk. For someone who has an appropriate level of grieving, there's not really a concern for prolonged grief. What would a bereavement plan of care look like?
So most of the time it's going to be follow-up calls with the family at set intervals. So maybe a call will be made to the primary caregiver at 2 or 3 weeks following the death. Then another call will be made perhaps at 3 months following the death. And then again at 6 months, and again at 9 months, and maybe most definitely on the anniversary of the death. We want to contact them again. And it might not be just a call. It might actually be a visit where perhaps the chaplain or the social worker will go out. And it could actually be a bereavement coordinator. We didn't mention that earlier, but many agencies have specialized bereavement coordinators who that's all they do is oversee the bereavement program. So it might be that they go and actually make a visit to the family member.
Now, so that's a lot of visits, but what if you have somebody who's not available, they've gone back to work or they moved back home to where they were, they wouldn't necessarily get visits. What other sort of interventions do you have?
Normally, an agency will also send letters to the family. That way, if you can't contact them by phone or visit, then you also can send them a letter. And in the letter, there will be some resources that we hope will help. Just some advice on things that they should consider as ways to help with their grieving process. Perhaps journaling, for one thing. Journaling can often be a great way for people to express some of the feelings that they have and put them down on paper. So journaling is one thing that's often encouraged. But the letters will come and they'll have different ideas and tips and resources for helping them manage their grief and to go through this grief process. Then another thing that many agencies will also do is provide what's called a bereavement support group. So this would be a group of individuals who have all experienced the death of a loved one, and they come together, and then the group would be facilitated by someone from the hospice agency, perhaps a social worker or a spiritual counselor who have been trained in facilitating these types of groups. And it just really helps to talk about what's happened to you, how you are doing with this, and learn from the others in the group of things that they're doing to also help themselves. And so the bonding helps because you're in a group with people who have experienced a similar loss. And then it also helps to just find out that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's experiencing this, or I'm not the only one who feels the way that I feel.
Right, a shared experience.
So bereavement support group is one thing that many agencies offer. And many agencies also offer what's called a memorial service, a remembrance service perhaps, where either once or twice a year they will have a time to bring in all of the families that want to come, and they will have a time of reading of special poems perhaps, music, and ways of bringing all these people together to express their feelings about the way that things have done. They may light candles or something of that sort, but it's a service to remember those who have died in the past year.
Okay. So with the bereavement support groups, let's go back to that for just a second. During the pandemic, I'm assuming that a lot of these bereavement support groups weren't able to meet, and there were some alternatives that were started. So there's some online virtual opportunities there?
Yes. Many agencies were able to flex and create some online bereavement support groups. For instance, they would meet by Zoom or Skype or whatever other video chat services were offered, and they would get the groups together by the video chat feature. And it worked out very well for many people. Some also even had virtual memorial services.
Mm-hmm. Some very inventive, creative virtual memorial services.
There were some agencies who got very creative in the things that they offered to provide bereavement support.
There was one agency that we collaborated with. I can't remember who now, but they had a virtual luminaria service where you place a bag with a candle in it, and you light that candle in memory of your loved ones. So they were all lighting their candles at the same time and found a way to basically gather everybody together there for this sacred moment of remembrance, even though they couldn't all be in one place, to have all their candles in one particular space.
Right. And so there's a lot of ways that bereavement services can be offered where it doesn't require gathering together as a group. And the agencies have created some of those and still are offering those as well, perhaps as a secondary feature.
So if you're a hospice provider, especially if you're a nurse, learn about your bereavement services. Find out what's involved, who provides them, and so you're better equipped to talk to your patients and your families about the bereavement services that are available once the patient dies. And if you are a family of a hospice patient, know that those bereavement services are going to continue to be there for you when your grief is at its worst, when you're dealing with those first holidays, those first anniversaries, and especially that 1-year anniversary of the death. Know that your agency is there to provide that bereavement support for you. And when they ask you if you want the bereavement services, go ahead and say yes.
Thanks for listening to Heartbeat from the Heart of Hospice. I'm Jerry Finter here with Helen Bauer. Because we know your hospice journey is 24/7, you can always find us at theheartofhospice.com. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts.
To connect with us, you can send an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. You can also find us on social media. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.